They said the Alpha King was invincible. They said his bloodline was blessed by the ancient gods themselves. They said no power in the realm could bring Kael Stormborn to his knees. They were wrong. In the forgotten archives of the Omega Sanctum, there exists a single burned page, all that remains of the testimony of what happened that fateful night. The words are scarred into the parchment as if written in liquid fire. The king came seeking salvation. The healer gave him truth. In that moment, the mightiest warrior in the realm learned what true power looked like, and it wore the face of the one he'd spent his life oppressing. But here's what they never tell you in the legends. The secret that destroyed him wasn't a weapon. It wasn't poison or magic or betrayal. It was something far more devastating. Something every Omega possessed, but had been forbidden to use for 3,000 years. And Sera Moonwhisper, the last true healer of the ancient bloodline, was about to remind the world why their kind had once been feared above all others. This is the story of how one Omega healer brought the most powerful Alpha in history to his knees with a single, impossible choice. The game was rigged from the start. She just changed the rules. The royal decree arrived at dawn, sealed with blood-red wax and the king's personal sigil, the crowned wolf devouring the moon. Sera knew what it meant before she broke the seal. 3 years she'd hidden in the remote mountain sanctum, practicing the old ways in secret, and still they'd found her. By order of His Majesty King Kael Stormborn, the Omega healer, known as Sera Moonwhisper, is commanded to present herself at the royal palace within 3 days' time. Failure to comply will result in the burning of the Omega Sanctum and all who shelter within. "They're calling for you again," Elder Mira said quietly, her weathered hands trembling as she ground medicinal herbs. "Just like they called for your mother." "My mother never came back," Sera replied, folding the parchment carefully. Her silver eyes, the mark of the true healing bloodline, reflected the morning light streaming through stained glass windows depicting Omegas of old, before the subjugation. "Then don't go. And let them burn this place? Kill everyone here?" Sera touched the ancient healing marks on her wrists, symbols that had been illegal to bear for centuries. "We both know I don't have a choice." The sanctum had been her refuge since childhood. When her parents disappeared during the Great Purge, King Kael's systematic elimination of anyone who remembered the old ways. The ways when Omegas weren't just servants and breeders, but wielders of the most potent magic in existence. Healing magic, life magic, the power to give and to take away. "There are whispers," Elder Mira said, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "The king is dying. Some poison that no healer can cure. They say he's killed 17 healers already, believing them incompetent or traitors. Then I'll be the 18th corpse. Or," Myra's ancient eyes gleamed, "you could be the one who reminds him what Omega healers truly are." Sera's hand instinctively went to the hidden pocket in her robes, where she kept her most precious possession, her mother's journal. The last entry, written in desperate handwriting, read, "The secret is not in healing. It's in understanding what healing truly means. Remember, my daughter, a healer who cannot harm is a slave. A healer who chooses mercy is a queen." 3 days later, Sera stood before the obsidian gates of the royal palace, the structure that had been built on the bones of Omega temples, using stones carved with healing runes as mere decoration. The irony wasn't lost on her. King's Guard surrounded her immediately, 12 alpha warriors, each radiating the natural dominance that made Omegas instinctively want to submit. But Sera had spent years building mental shields, training her mind to resist the biological imperative. "You will address the king as your majesty," the captain growled. "You will not look directly at him. You will speak only when spoken to. You will." "I know the rules designed to break my kind," Sera interrupted calmly. "Let's not waste time." The captain's hand moved to his sword, but a voice like thunder echoed from within. "Bring her." They led her through corridors lined with portraits of the Stormborn dynasty, generation after generation of Alpha Kings who'd ruled with absolute power. The last Omega Queen had been erased from history 3 centuries ago. The throne room doors opened, and Sera finally laid eyes on the man who'd haunted her nightmares. Kael Stormborn was everything the legends promised and more. Even dying, he radiated power. Broad-shouldered and battle-scarred, with dark hair and eyes like winter storms, he sat upon a throne of swords, each blade taken from an Omega Guardian during the subjugation. But what struck her most was the gray pallor of his skin, the way his hand trembled as it gripped the armrest, the barely suppressed agony in those storm-gray eyes. He was dying. Painfully.
Slowly. Good.
So, his voice resonated through the chamber. You're the last Moonwhisper. His eyes raked over her, and she felt the full weight of his alpha presence pressing down. Most Omegas would be on their knees by now. Sera remained standing, meeting his gaze directly. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise? Anger? Respect? They say your bloodline once healed kings and beggars alike, he continued. They say your grandmother could cure any ailment, mend any wound. His jaw clenched. They also say your family keeps secrets. We kept knowledge, Sera corrected. There's a difference. Semantic games won't save you, Omega. He leaned forward, and she could see the black veins creeping up his neck. Poison. Ancient and lethal. 17 healers have failed to cure me. Some claimed they couldn't. Others admitted they wouldn't. His smile was cruel. All of them burned for their failure. What makes you different? Sera took a deep breath. This was the moment. The choice her mother had written about. I can heal you, she said clearly. Hope flashed in his eyes, quickly masked. But I won't. Not yet. The throne room went deathly silent. You dare. The captain of the guard started forward, but Kael raised a hand. Let her speak. His voice was dangerously quiet. I want to hear what price the last healer thinks her services command. Sera felt every eye in the throne room upon her. This was the moment that would either save her people or damn them all. Not a price, your majesty. A wager. Kael's eyebrows rose. A wager? How unexpected. He settled back, intrigued despite his pain. Explain. You're dying of Shadowbane poison, Sera said, her healer's sight reading the corruption in his body. Extracted from the heartwood of the dying god's oak. Rare, expensive, and very specifically chosen.
She paused.
It was meant for someone else. Someone you killed. His expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened on the throne. Shadowbane works slowly, specifically to cause maximum suffering. The victim experiences every injury they've ever inflicted on others, relived in their own flesh. Tell me, your majesty, how many have you killed? Thousands, he said without hesitation or remorse. Then you'll experience thousands of deaths before your own. Sera stepped closer, ignoring the guard's growls. But here's what makes Shadowbane fascinating. It can only be cured by someone whose bloodline the victim has wronged. The poison recognizes guilt, you see. It's quite poetic. Kael's face darkened. My father executed your parents during the purge.
Yes.
Which means I'm likely the only person alive who can save you. She smiled, and it wasn't kind. So here's my wager. Give me 7 days of freedom in this palace. Let me go anywhere, speak to anyone, access any room or record. If, after 7 days, I choose not to heal you, you may execute me. But if I do heal you... She paused for effect. You will grant one decree of my choosing. Anything I ask, sworn before witnesses and sealed in blood oath. The throne room erupted in outrage. The Omega dares to bargain. This is treason. Kill her now, your majesty. But Kael held up his hand again, silencing them all. His storm-gray eyes studied her with an intensity that should have made her falter. You realize, he said slowly, that I could torture you, force you to heal me. You could try. Sera's voice remained steady. But healing magic requires will. If I don't choose to channel it, you get nothing but a corpse with pretty eyes. She tilted her head. Your 17 dead healers proved that, didn't they? The ones you tortured until they tried to fake healing magic? How did that work out? A muscle twitched in his jaw. She'd struck a nerve. Why 7 days? Why not heal me now and make your demand? Because, Sera said carefully, I need to know if you're worth saving. The silence that followed was absolute. No one had ever questioned the king's worth. The very concept was heretical. Kael stared at her for a long moment. Then, shockingly, he laughed, a harsh, pained sound that ended in a grimace. Bold. Foolish, but bold. He stood slowly, each movement clearly agonizing, and descended the throne steps. Up close, he towered over her, radiating dominance and danger. 7 days. But you'll wear a binding cuff. Not to control you, but to track you. And you'll report to me each evening with your findings. Agreed. And if you try to escape, everyone in the Omega Sanctum dies. Sera's expression didn't change. I expected nothing less from you. He gestured to a guard, who brought forward an ornate silver cuff. The moment it closed around Sera's wrist, she felt the binding magic activate. Not painful, but present. Watchful. One more thing, Kael said, his voice dropping low enough that only she could hear. I know what you're really doing. You want to find evidence of my crimes. Proof to rally the people against me. You think 7 days of freedom will give you ammunition for revolution. Sera met his eyes unflinchingly. Then why allow it? Because I'm curious. His smile was sharp as a blade. Your mother tried the same thing, you know. She had 6 days of freedom. On the 7th day, I had her executed for treason. The blood drained from Sera's face. So, let's see if the daughter is smarter than the mother. He turned away dismissively. Captain, show our guest to the East Tower. And assign her a shadow, someone to ensure she doesn't get lost. As guards escorted her away, Sera's mind raced. Her mother had been here, had tried this exact thing, and had failed. But her mother hadn't known the secret. The one Sera had discovered in the ancient texts hidden beneath the sanctum, written in a language only true healing bloodlines could read. The secret that would change everything. The East Tower room was far nicer than Sera expected, clearly designed to contain important prisoners in comfort. Windows overlooking the palace gardens, a plush bed with silk sheets, even a private bathing room. A gilded cage. Comfortable enough for you, Omega? Sera turned to find a woman leaning against the doorframe. She was tall, athletic, with short copper hair and amber eyes that assessed everything. An alpha, clearly, but something in her bearing was different from the brutish guards. I've had worse, Sera replied carefully. I'm sure you have. The woman entered, moving with a warrior's grace. Captain Lyra Ashford. I've been assigned as your shadow for the next 7 days. She said the word with obvious distaste. I think it's a waste of my talents, but orders are orders. You don't approve of the king's decision. I don't approve of elaborate games when a simple execution would suffice. Lyra settled into a chair, feet up on the table. But Kael likes his entertainment, especially when he's in pain. You call him by his first name. We grew up together. Before he was king, before I was captain. Something dark flickered across her face. Before everything went to hell. Interesting. Sera filed that information away. If you're supposed to shadow me, I assume I'm free to begin exploring? You're free to try. Lyra stood. But let me save you some time. The records you want, the ones documenting the purge, the execution orders, all the evidence of your precious crimes, they're in the royal archive. Heavily guarded. Sealed with blood magic that requires royal permission to access. Then I'll start elsewhere. Where? Sera smiled slightly. The servants' quarters. Lyra blinked. The what? If you want to know the truth about a king, don't ask his nobles. Ask his servants. An hour later, Sera sat in the palace kitchens, surrounded by curious servants, mostly Omegas and Betas who'd never expected to see one of their own walking freely through the palace halls. Is it true? A young Omega girl whispered. Are you really going to heal the king? Maybe, Sera said gently. Tell me, how does he treat the Omega servants here? The room went quiet. Eyes darted nervously toward Lyra, who stood watching from the doorway. An older woman finally spoke, her voice carefully neutral. Better than his father did. We're not beaten without cause. We receive meals and rest days. By law, we cannot be killed without trial. How generous, Sera said dryly. And the breeding programs? More silence. Then the young girl spoke again, her voice breaking. My sister was chosen last year. She didn't survive the birth. They said it was an honor to die, giving the alpha nobility more heirs. Sera's hands clenched. How many? This year? 37 Omega women sent to the breeding houses. 12 survived. The numbers hit like physical blows. Sera looked at Lyra, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. The king doesn't oversee the breeding programs directly, Lyra said quietly. That's Lord Blackwood's domain. And the king allows it, which makes him complicit. Sera stood. Show me the breeding houses. That's not permitted. The wager was 7 days of freedom. Anywhere, anyone, any room. Sera's silver eyes flashed. Or does the mighty King Kael break his word? Lyra's jaw clenched. Then she nodded curtly. Follow me. The breeding houses were located in the palace's lower levels, out of sight, out of mind. The smell hit Sera first. Fear, pain, antiseptic attempting to cover blood and death. Rows of small rooms lined the corridor, each containing an Omega woman in various stages of pregnancy. Some sat hollow-eyed and silent. Others wept quietly. A few called out desperately as Sera passed. Please, please help us. Tell my family I'm alive. Make it stop. Please make it stop. Sera stopped at one room, where a woman lay pale and sweating, clearly in difficult labor. A beta midwife worked frantically, but Sera could see with her healer's sight that the baby was positioned wrong. Both mother and child would die without intervention. Open this door, Sera commanded. I can't. Open it, or I'll tell your king that his shadow prevented me from exercising my freedom. Lyra hesitated, then unlocked the door. Sera rushed to the woman's side, her hands already glowing with healing magic. She could feel the life force ebbing, the baby's distress, the mother's system failing. What are you? The midwife started. Quiet. Sera's power flowed, gentle and sure, guiding the baby into position, strengthening the mother's failing body, easing the pain. Minutes later, a baby's cry filled the room. The mother wept, clutching her newborn. Thank you, blessed healer. Sera stood, her hands still glowing faintly. She turned to find Lyra staring at her with an unreadable expression. Healing magic, the captain whispered. True healing magic. I've never seen. Now you understand, Sera said quietly, what your king tried to exterminate. The power to save lives. To ease suffering. She looked around at the breeding houses. And you let this happen. You all let this happen. It's the law. It's slavery. Sera's voice cut like a blade. Dressed up in legal language and noble tradition, but slavery nonetheless. She started walking toward the exit. Take me back. I need to bathe. I feel filthy just being here. That night, Sera sat alone in her tower room, writing in her mother's journal by candlelight. The binding cuff on her wrist glowed softly, reminding her she was still a prisoner. A knock came at the door. Enter, she called, expecting Lyra. Instead, King Kael himself stepped through, moving slowly, clearly in pain. He wore simple clothes instead of his armor, making him look almost human. You healed one of the breeding Omegas today, he said without preamble. I did. Why? Sera looked up at him. Because she was dying. Because her baby was dying. Because I'm a healer. She paused. Did you come to punish me for it?
No.
He moved to the window, staring out at the moonlit gardens. I came because I wanted to see your face when I told you something. He turned, and in the candlelight, his expression was harder to read. Your mother healed people too. Every day of her 6 days of freedom, she used her magic to help servants, prisoners, anyone suffering. She thought it would prove that Omegas deserved freedom. Sera's heart clenched. On the 7th day, I had her executed anyway. Because mercy is not the same as power. He stepped closer. You have 5 days left. Whatever you're planning, whatever secret you think you've discovered, it won't matter. It never does. After he left, Sera opened her mother's journal to the final pages. Past the last written entry, in invisible ink that only showed under moonlight, was a formula, an equation, a secret. The secret of what healing magic truly was, and how to weaponize it. Day 3 dawned gray and cold. Sera had spent the previous day in the palace dungeons, healing prisoners who'd been tortured for information or left to rot for minor offenses. Each healing session revealed more horror, the systematic cruelty that kept the kingdom running. But today, she needed information. "I want access to the royal archive," she told Lyra over breakfast. The captain nearly choked on her tea. "Absolutely not. That requires the king's blood seal." "Then arrange for me to meet with him. He's in the war room, planning the spring campaigns against the northern territories." "Perfect. I'd love to see how he decides which villages to burn." Lyra's amber eyes narrowed. "You're trying to provoke me. I'm trying to understand the man I'm supposed to save." Sera stood. "Take me to him, or explain to your king why his shadow is limiting my freedom." The war room was exactly as brutal as expected. A massive table displayed a map with markers indicating troop movements, supply lines, and targets. A dozen alpha commanders surrounded it, arguing strategy. "If we strike here, we can cut off their supply routes. They'll retreat to the mountains. Then we burn the mountains." "Enough." Kael's voice silenced them all. He looked up, saw Sera, and something flickered across his face. "Everyone out." The commanders filed out reluctantly, shooting Sera dark looks. When the door closed, Kael leaned against the table, clearly exhausted. "You look worse," Sera observed. "Thank you for your professional assessment." His sarcasm was weak, betraying his condition. "What do you want?" "Access to the royal archive."
No. Why?
"Afraid of what I'll find. Afraid you'll waste time on irrelevant history when you should be deciding whether to heal me." He moved around the table, his hand leaving a smear of blood where he'd gripped the edge. 3 days gone. 4 remaining. The clock is ticking, healer. I need context. For what? To understand what you've built, what you're protecting, what you're willing to die for. Sera met his eyes. "You're not just a tyrant, are you? There's calculation behind the cruelty. Method to the madness. I want to understand it." Kael studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he bit his thumb, letting blood well up. He pressed it to a small crystal on his belt, which glowed red.
"There."
Blood seal activated. "Lyra will escort you to the archive. You have until sunset." "Why this sudden cooperation?" "Because," he said quietly, "I want you to see the whole picture. Not just the parts that fit your narrative of the evil Alpha King." He turned back to his maps. "Maybe then you'll understand why some things have to be the way they are." The Royal Archive was a cathedral of knowledge, soaring ceilings, endless shelves of books and scrolls, preserved records spanning centuries. A beta archivist named Marcus greeted them nervously. "The King's blood seal grants you access to everything except the sealed section," he explained, wringing his hands. "What are you looking for?" "Records of the Purge. Execution orders. Census data on Omega populations before and after the subjugation." Marcus paled. Those are difficult subjects, mistress." "I'm sure they are. Show me." Hours later, Sera sat surrounded by documents, her hands trembling. The numbers were staggering. Before the subjugation, Omega population, 2.4 million. After, 340,000. Execution orders signed by Kael's father. 15,000 documents. Execution orders signed by Kael himself. 247. She stared at that last number. 247. Not thousands. Not tens of thousands. Surprised, she looked up to find Lyra watching her. "His father killed thousands of Omegas," the captain said quietly. "Public executions, mass burnings, entire families eliminated. When Kael took the throne 8 years ago, everyone expected him to continue.
She paused.
Instead, he executed 247 people, all convicted of actual crimes like murder or treason. No mass purges. No family eliminations. But he maintained the slavery, Sera said coldly. The breeding programs. The subjugation laws. He inherited a kingdom built on those systems. Every noble family, every alpha house, every regional lord profits from Omega subjugation. If he'd tried to abolish it overnight, Lyra shook her head. There would have been civil war. The kingdom would have torn itself apart. So, he chose stability over justice. He chose survival. For everyone. Lyra sat down across from her. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's complicated. Sera pulled out another document, census records showing Omega death rates in breeding houses. Under Kael's father, 78% mortality. Under Kael, 35%. Still horrific. But less horrific. He's been changing things, Lyra continued.
Slowly.
Quietly. New laws requiring medical care for breeding Omegas. Limiting the number of pregnancies per woman. Allowing Omega children to learn to read, something that was death penalty under his father. She leaned forward. He's playing a long game, Sera. Dismantling a system of oppression piece by piece, without triggering a revolution that would kill thousands. Or, Sera countered, he's making minor improvements to maintain control while preserving his power. Maybe both are true. Sera stood, moving to another section. Show me the sealed section. I told you, that's forbidden. The king gave me access to everything except the sealed section. Which means there's something there he doesn't want me to see. Sera's silver eyes gleamed. What's he hiding, Lyra? The captain's jaw clenched. Records that could destabilize the kingdom. Show me. I can't. You mean you won't? Sera stepped closer. What's in there, Lyra? What secret is worth protecting? Before Lyra could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the palace. Shouts echoed from the corridors. Marcus burst back into the archive, his face pale with terror. Assassins. Assassins in the palace. The king. Sera was running before he finished the sentence. Sera burst into the throne room to find chaos. 3 black-clad assassins lay dead on the marble floor, but a fourth had Kael pinned against his throne, a poisoned blade at his throat. The king's guards were held back by some kind of magical barrier shimmering in the air. One more step and he dies, the assassin snarled. Sera's healer sight immediately assessed the situation. The barrier was blood magic, specifically Omega blood magic. The kind that had been forbidden for centuries. You're Omega, Sera said quietly. The assassins had fell back, revealing a young woman with silver eyes, like Sera's own. My name is Diya Silverstream, and I'm here to kill the tyrant who murdered my family. Diya, wait. Kael gasped, the poisoned blade breaking his skin. Black veins spread from the wound. Shut up. Diya's hand trembled. You killed them. My mother, my father, my little brother. You signed the execution order yourself. What were they convicted of? Sera asked, her voice calm despite her racing heart. Treason, Diya spat. They were accused of hiding healing texts, of teaching Omega children the old magic. Tears streamed down her face. They were scholars. They never hurt anyone. Sera felt something click in her mind. When was this? 5 years ago. The last public execution of Omegas in the capital. Sera turned to Lyra, who'd followed her in. Show me the execution record for the Silverstream family.
Now.
Sera.
Now.
Lyra ran. The throne room held its breath. Kael's eyes were starting to glaze, the poison working fast. Minutes that felt like hours passed before Lyra returned, clutching a document. She looked at it, and her face went white. Oh gods. Read it, Sera commanded. Lyra's voice shook. Execution order for the Silverstream family, signed by King Kael Stormborn.
She paused.
But there's a second page. A pardon order, also signed by King Kael, dated 2 days earlier, with orders for the family to be relocated to the southern sanctuary under false identities. Diya's blade wavered. What? Your family is alive, Lyra continued, reading faster. Relocated to. She stopped, looking at Kael with shock. You saved them. You faked their execution. Liar. Diya screamed. I saw their bodies. I saw them burn. You saw political prisoners who died in the dungeons, Kael managed, his voice weak. Criminals who'd earned death. I couldn't save everyone, but I could save some. He coughed, blood on his lips. Your family, they were innocent. They didn't deserve. His words faded as the poison overwhelmed him. Sera made a split-second decision. Her hands began to glow with healing magic as she stepped forward. Diya, drop the barrier.
Now.
Why should I trust you? Because I'm the last Moonwhisper. Because my parents were executed in the Purge, actually executed, not faked. Because I have every reason to hate him as much as you do. Sera's eyes blazed. But I need him alive long enough to understand the truth.
Don't you?
Diya's barrier flickered and fell. Sera rushed forward, her hands pressing against Kael's wounds. The poison was advanced, a different kind than his Shadowbane affliction, but equally lethal. Her healing magic poured into him, fighting the toxin. She could feel his life force guttering like a candle in the wind. Deeper she went, past the physical wounds, into the core of his being. And there she saw it. Memories. Not hers, his. Flowing through the healing connection. A young Kael, barely 20, kneeling before his father's throne. I won't sign the execution orders. They're children, father. They've done nothing wrong. His father's fist connecting with his face. You will learn to rule, or you will die trying. Kael, older now, sitting alone in his study, surrounded by execution orders. His hand shaking as he signed some, burning others in secret. Tears streaming down his face. Forgive me. Forgive me. I can't save you all. A conversation with a trusted advisor. If you try to end the subjugation now, the noble houses will revolt. Thousands will die in civil war. Mostly Omegas caught in the crossfire. You must be patient. Change the system from within. Kael, in a dark cloak, sneaking through the lower city, delivering food and medicine to Omega families. Arranging fake deaths and secret relocations. Risking everything, telling no one. His voice, broken and bitter. They'll remember me as a tyrant, but at least some will live. Sera gasped and pulled back. The healing was complete, both assassin's poison and, she realized with shock, a significant portion of his Shadowbane affliction neutralized. Her power had worked almost unconsciously, driven by the connection. Kael's eyes fluttered open. You healed me. Don't thank me yet. Sera's voice was shaky.
I saw.
Through the healing connection, I saw your memories. She looked at Diya. He's telling the truth. Your family lives. Diya collapsed, sobbing. Where are they? Lyra knelt beside her. I'll take you to them. I swear on my honor. As guards finally broke through to secure the throne room, Sera stood on trembling legs. She'd used more power than intended. The healing connection had shown her everything, the impossible choices, the secret kindnesses, the slow dismantling of an evil system by someone who had to appear evil to survive. 4 days left in our wager, Kael said quietly, sitting up slowly. Do you have your answer? Sera looked at him, really looked, saw past the cruel king to the trapped man beneath. A man doing terrible things to prevent even more terrible things. A man breaking himself in secret to save as many as he could. Not yet, she whispered. But I'm beginning to understand. That night, Sera couldn't sleep. She stood at her window, watching the moon rise over the palace. The binding cuff on her wrist felt heavier than ever. You're wondering if he deserves to live. She turned to find Kael standing in her doorway again. He'd made a habit of these late visits, she realized. As if these quiet moments in the dark were the only time he could drop his mask. I'm wondering if I have the right to judge, she admitted. He stepped into the moonlight. The Shadowbane veins on his neck had receded significantly after her partial healing. You have every right. I killed your parents. Did you? His silence was answer enough. You faked their deaths too, Sera breathed. Didn't you? I tried. His voice cracked. I had documents prepared. A ship waiting. But my father discovered the plan.
He made me watch.
Made me sign the real execution order. To prove my loyalty. He looked away. I was 22 years old and too weak to save them. Sera felt tears burning her eyes. Where does it end, Kael? How many more have to suffer while you play your long game? I don't know. He sounded utterly exhausted. But every day I delay true change, I save lives. Every law I reform slowly prevents a civil war that would kill thousands. I'm trying to build a bridge to a better world, but bridges take time to construct. And in the meantime, Omega women die in breeding houses. Yes. He didn't flinch from the accusation. That blood is on my hands. Along with all the rest. He turned to leave, then paused. 3 days left. Decide soon, healer. Because I'm tired. So, very tired. And maybe the kingdom would be better off if I died, and someone else had to solve these impossible problems. After he left, Sera sat down and opened her mother's journal to the secret formula. The one that explained the true nature of healing magic. The secret was simple, really, devastating in its simplicity. Healing magic didn't just restore. It could also reveal. Every healer who touched a patient formed a connection, saw their true self, their memories, their soul laid bare. Which meant that when Sera fully healed Kael's Shadowbane poison, she would see everything. Every choice, every crime, every secret. The complete truth of who he really was. And then she would have to decide, was he a monster or a man trying desperately not to become one? 3 days to make the choice that would reshape a kingdom. The clock was ticking. Day 5 began with an unexpected summons, not from Kael, but from Lord Blackwood, the nobleman who oversaw the breeding programs. This can't be good, Lyra muttered as they walked through the palace's noble wing, where the architecture shifted from austere military function to grotesque opulence. Lord Blackwood's chambers were a monument to excess, gilded furniture, exotic pelts, and disturbingly, a collection of jeweled Omega collars displayed like hunting trophies. The man himself was exactly what Sera expected, corpulent, decorated in excessive finery, with cold calculating eyes that assessed her like livestock. Ah, the famous healer. His smile revealed gold teeth. I've heard such interesting things about your little tour of my facilities. Your facilities, Sera said flatly, are death houses decorated with silk sheets. Harsh words. He poured himself wine, not offering any to his guests. But then, your kind has always been emotional, lacking the perspective to understand necessity. The necessity of killing women for heirs? The necessity of maintaining proper social order. He settled into his chair. You see, Miss Moonwhisper, Omegas are resources. Valuable ones, to be sure, but resources nonetheless. The breeding programs ensure genetic diversity among alpha lines while providing purpose to those who would otherwise be useless. Sera's hands clenched, her healing magic flickering dangerously. I didn't summon you here to debate philosophy, Blackwood continued. I have a proposition. The king is dying. Everyone knows this. When he dies, there will be a power vacuum. He leaned forward. I lead a coalition of noble houses who believe it's time to return to the old ways. My father's ways. Your healing the king would be inconvenient. You want me to let him die. I want you to be smart. Kael has been a weak king, soft on Omega rights, hesitant to expand our territories, unwilling to properly discipline the lower classes. Under my guidance, the kingdom would be strong again. His eyes glittered. And you, my dear, would be rewarded. Freedom for you and your sanctum. Legal protection. Even a seat on the advisory council. In exchange for murder. In exchange for inaction. Simply don't heal him. Let nature take its course. He smiled. After all, he killed your parents. Don't you want justice? Sera stood slowly. Justice and revenge are not the same thing. And if you think I'd trade one tyrant for a worse one, You understand nothing about me or about Omegas. Blackwood's expression darkened. You're making a mistake.
No.
You made the mistake of thinking I could be bought. She turned to leave. The king's time is almost up, Blackwood called after her. When the Shadowbane poison finishes its work and he dies screaming, remember you chose this. Outside, Sera was shaking with rage, and something else, fear. Because Blackwood was right about one thing. Kael was running out of time. There's something you need to know, Lyra said quietly as they walked back. Blackwood isn't just ambitious. He's dangerous. 3 years ago, there was an Omega uprising in the southern province. Blackwood convinced the King's Council it was a serious threat.
Was it?
50 Omegas asking for better working conditions. Blackwood had 300 executed as co-conspirators. Lyra's jaw clenched. Kael was away on campaign. By the time he returned and countermanded the order, it was too late. He stripped Blackwood of military authority, but couldn't remove him entirely. Too much support among the noble houses. They reached the East Tower, but instead of going to her room, Sera made a decision. Take me to the sealed section, Sera. Whatever is in there, I need to know, especially now. Her silver eyes blazed. Your king trusted me enough to show me partial truth. Time for the complete picture. Lyra struggled with herself visibly. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. If Blackwood is making moves, you're right. You need to know everything. The sealed section was behind 3 locked doors, each requiring different keys. The final door bore an inscription in the old tongue. Truth is a weapon. Wield with care. Inside, the shelves held fewer documents, but somehow felt heavier. More important, what am I looking for? Sera asked. The Project Phoenix documents. Kael's secret plan. Lyra pulled out a leather-bound folder, its pages covered in the king's own handwriting. This is what he's been building toward. What all the slow changes have been leading to. Sera opened the folder and began reading. Project Phoenix, a comprehensive plan for systematic dismantling of Omega subjugation. Phase 1, years 1 to 5, current established stability. Reduce mortality rates. Improve conditions. Build political capital. Identify and neutralize hardline opposition. Phase 2, years 6 to 10, introduce educational reforms. Allow Omega property ownership. Establish legal protections against abuse. Begin dismantling breeding programs. Phase 3, years 11 to 15, grant limited political representation. Allow Omega alpha marriages. Establish full legal equality. Phase 4, year 16 plus, complete social integration. Constitutional reforms ensuring permanent protections. The documents included detailed legislative proposals, economic impact assessments, contingency plans for noble resistance, even strategies for public opinion management. He's been planning this for 8 years, Sera whispered. Every reform, every small change, it's all part of a larger design. He calls it Phoenix because he's trying to burn down the old system and let something new rise from the ashes, Lyra explained. But it has to be controlled, managed. One spark at the wrong time, and the whole kingdom burns chaotically, killing thousands. Sera flipped through more pages, finding detailed profiles of nobles, who could be trusted, who had to be managed, who needed to be removed. Blackwood's file was marked Terminal, eliminate before Phase 2. He was going to remove Blackwood, Sera said. He's been gathering evidence of Blackwood's crimes for years. Enough to execute him legally and turn other nobles against him. Lyra's voice was grim.
But he needed more time.
Another year, maybe 2. Time he doesn't have. Sera closed the folder, her mind reeling. If he dies now, Project Phoenix dies with him, and Blackwood takes power. Now you understand the stakes. Sera did. The choice before her wasn't just about one man's life or death. It was about the future of her entire people. Healing Kael meant supporting his slow, careful revolution. Letting him die meant either Blackwood's return to brutal oppression or a chaotic uprising that would kill thousands. No wonder her mother had failed this test. The weight of it was crushing. 2 days left, Sera said quietly. I need to think. That evening, Kael didn't visit. Instead, A servant brought a message. The poison progresses faster now. I estimate 36 hours before it reaches my heart. After that, even your magic cannot save me. I understand if you choose to watch me die. I've made my peace with it. But know this. Whatever you decide, I don't blame you. You have every right to hate me. K. Sera crumpled the note. She looked at her mother's journal, at the secret formula, at everything she'd learned in 5 days of freedom. The truth was complicated. Kael was both monster and savior, tyrant and reformer, killer and protector. He was a man carrying the weight of impossible choices, slowly dying under their burden. Day 6 dawned with a messenger pounding on Sera's door before sunrise. The king has collapsed, the servant gasped. He's asking for you. Sera found Kael in his private chambers, not the grand royal bedchamber, but a smaller, sparse room. He lay on a simple bed, his skin gray as ash, black veins spreading across his entire torso now like a spider's web. You look terrible, she said, moving to his bedside. Flatterer. His attempt at a smile became a grimace of pain. The shadowbane has reached my lungs. Every breath feels like drowning. He coughed, blood flecking his lips. Poetic, really. Dying slowly, experiencing every death I've caused. I wonder whose death I'm feeling now. Don't. Sera's healer sight showed her the devastating truth. The poison had progressed too far. Even if she healed him now, the damage might be irreversible. I need to tell you something. His voice was weak, but urgent. Before I lose the ability to speak. About your parents. Sera's heart stopped. The day my father ordered their execution, I tried to save them. Had a ship ready, documents forged. But he discovered it. Kael's eyes were distant, seeing the past. He made me choose. Sign their death warrant and maintain my position as heir, or refuse and watch him execute not just your parents, but everyone in the Omega Sanctum. 300 souls. So you sacrificed 2 to save 300.
No.
His voice cracked. I was a coward. I told myself it was the logical choice, the greater good. But the truth. He looked at her, and she saw genuine anguish. I was terrified of my father. Terrified of dying. So I let good people die to save myself. He coughed again, more blood. Your mother's last words were, "Tell my daughter that mercy is not weakness." She knew, somehow, that you'd be here one day, making this same impossible choice. Tears burned Sera's eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve the complete truth. Not the sanitized version, where I'm a tragic hero making hard choices.
He struggled to breathe.
I'm a man who's done terrible things for complicated reasons. Some choices were necessary. Others were cowardice dressed up as strategy. You should know the difference before you decide. A knock at the door. Lyra entered, her face pale. My lord, the noble council demands an emergency session. They know you're dying. Blackwood is calling for immediate succession proceedings. Of course he is. Kael tried to sit up. Failed. How long before they convene? 2 hours. Then I have 2 hours to live. He looked at Sera. Make your choice, healer. Heal me, or let Blackwood inherit a kingdom. Either way, I'm at peace. Liar, Sera said softly. You're not at peace. You're terrified that everything you've built will burn. That all those slow reforms, all those secret rescues, all that careful planning will be for nothing. He didn't deny it. Sera stood, her mind racing. 1 day left in their wager. But time had run out anyway. She could heal him now, form the complete healing connection, see the full truth of his soul, and decide. Or she could walk away, let him die, and watch Blackwood undo 8 years of progress in 8 days. I need 1 hour alone, she said. Then I'll give you my answer. Back in the East Tower, Sera laid out her mother's journal, the Project Phoenix documents, and all her notes from the past 6 days. She closed her eyes and let her healer's intuition guide her, the same instinct that had guided Omega healers for millennia. The truth crystallized suddenly, shockingly clear. The Shadowbane poison had been meant for Blackwood. That's why it required healing from someone wronged by the victim. It was meant to be unhealable because no Omega family Blackwood had destroyed still lived. The assassin had used it on Kael by mistake, or perhaps as a backup target. But there was more. The poison's progression, too slow, too measured. Almost as if Sera's eyes widened. She grabbed the Project Phoenix documents, flipping to medical assessments. There, buried in notes, Shadowbane poison acquired from confiscated assassination supplies. Potential strategic use as leverage device. He poisoned himself, she whispered. It was insane. Brilliant and insane. Kael had deliberately infected himself with a poison that only an Omega from a wronged family could cure, knowing it would force a confrontation. Knowing he'd have to find the last Moonwhisper. Knowing she'd demand answers. He'd orchestrated this entire scenario to force her to see the truth. To see him. Because if she healed him after knowing everything, after seeing his memories, after understanding the complete picture, it wouldn't be mercy or coercion. It would be genuine choice. Genuine forgiveness. And that forgiveness, witnessed by the entire court, would legitimize his reforms. An Omega healer publicly saving the king would shift public perception more than 1,000 secret rescues. The manipulative bastard had gambled his life on her moral calculus. Sera should have been furious. Instead, she started laughing, high and slightly hysterical. You figured it out. She spun to find Kael leaning in the doorway, barely standing, blood soaking through his shirt. He must have dragged himself here. You magnificent, self-destructive idiot, she said. You poisoned yourself as a political gambit. Not my finest plan, he admitted, sliding down the wall to sit. But I was running out of options. Blackwood was making moves. The noble houses were restless. I needed a catalyst. He coughed wetly. A healer saving the tyrant king, publicly, dramatically, would demonstrate Omega power, shift public perception, and give me the political capital to accelerate Phase 2. And if I chose not to heal you, then I'd die. Blackwood would take power, and hopefully someone else would eventually finish what I started. He smiled bitterly. Though I'll admit, I was hoping you'd choose differently. This whole thing, the wager, the 7 days, showing me everything, it was manipulation.
Yes.
And also truth. He met her eyes. I showed you the real documents, the real crimes, the real reforms. I let you see my memories, my soul. Everything was genuine, Sera. I just arranged the stage to make sure you'd actually look. Sera stared at him, this dying king who'd bet everything on her choice. You're either the most brilliant political mind I've ever met or completely insane. Probably both. His breathing was labored now. Council meets in 30 minutes. Blackwood will call for succession. If you're going to heal me, now would be good. And what do I get? You promised me one decree if I healed you. Name it. Full Omega emancipation. Not in 15 years. Now. The silence stretched. Kael's jaw clenched. That will cause civil war.
No.
It will cause you to accelerate your timeline. Sera knelt before him. You've been planning this for 8 years. Gathering evidence, building alliances, weakening opposition. You're further along than you've admitted. Blackwood is the last major obstacle, and you have enough to remove him. She leaned closer. You don't need 15 years. You need courage. The courage you didn't have when my parents died. He flinched as if struck. Heal you, and you grant immediate emancipation, Sera pressed. Phase 2, Phase 3, and Phase 4, compressed into one explosive decree. Let the kingdom react. Let the nobles rebel if they dare. But end it.
Now.
Thousands could die. Thousands are dying anyway. In breeding houses. In dungeons. Under the boots of men like Blackwood. Her silver eyes blazed. You've been building a bridge to a better world. I'm asking you to burn the bridge and force everyone to swim. Kael stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. Fear, hope, desperate relief. You're right, he whispered. I've been a coward. Playing it safe, telling myself I needed more time. But the truth is, I was afraid to see it through. And now, he straightened as much as his dying body allowed. Heal me. I'll give you your decree, and either we'll change the world or die trying. Sera placed her hands on his chest. This is going to hurt. The complete healing connection. I'll see everything. Every memory, every choice, every secret. You'll be completely vulnerable. I know. He covered her hands with his. I'm ready. One more thing. Sera's voice softened. My mother told you to tell me that mercy is not weakness. But she was wrong about one thing. What's that? Mercy without accountability is weakness. Mercy with accountability is strength. She met his eyes. I forgive you for my parents' deaths, but I will hold you accountable for every promise you make today. Understood? Understood. Sera closed her eyes and let her healing magic flow. Not the gentle trickle she'd used before, but a torrent. All her power, all her skill, everything her bloodline had preserved for generations. The magic poured into him, seeking out the poison, neutralizing it, repairing the damage. And as she healed, the connection opened. She saw everything. The memories flooded through Sera like a raging river. Kael, at 6 years old, watching his father execute an Omega healer for insolence. The healer's crime, asking for payment for her services. Young Kael crying himself to sleep, his mother, long dead, unable to comfort him. Kael, at 15, required to witness his first purge, vomiting behind the execution platform while his father laughed. You'll grow stronger, boy, or you'll die weak. Kael, at 20, standing before the Omega Sanctum with torch in hand, his father's command ringing in his ears, his hand trembling. Then, in darkness, sneaking back to leave gold and supplies hidden where they'd be found. Kael, at 22, signing his parents' execution order with tears streaming down his face, his father's dagger at his throat. Do it, or I'll kill everyone you've been secretly protecting. Yes, I know. I've always known. I was testing you. The memory of Sera's parents flowed through the connection, their faces, their defiance, their final moments. Kael had looked away. He'd been unable to watch what he'd signed into being. But there was more. So much more. Secret ledgers showing thousands of Omegas relocated under false identities. Breeding house mortalities that were actually escapes Kael had arranged. Execution orders publicly signed and privately countermanded. Midnight meetings with Omega resistance leaders. Yes, there was a resistance, operating with the king's tacit approval. Kael feeding them information, resources, protection, in exchange for patience. Give me time. I'll give you freedom. The day he took the throne and his father finally died. Kael alone in the throne room, weeping with relief and horror. I'm free. God's help me, I'm finally free. Then, grimly. And now the real work begins. 8 years of impossible choices. 8 years of playing the tyrant while secretly dismantling tyranny. 8 years of carrying the weight of every Omega who died while he moved too slowly, balanced against the thousands who would die if he moved too fast. The memories threatened to drown Sera. The sheer complexity of managing a kingdom built on oppression, where every ally was also an enemy, where every step forward risked 3 steps back, where appearing weak meant death, but being strong meant becoming the monster. She saw his nightmares, the faces of everyone he'd failed haunting him, the children in breeding houses, the men in dungeons, the families destroyed by noble cruelty he couldn't prevent without revealing his hand. But she also saw his determination, the careful planning, the alliances built in shadow, the evidence gathered against Blackwood and dozens of others, the new laws drafted and ready to implement. Project Phoenix, not just words on paper, but a living, breathing revolution waiting to be unleashed. And at the center of it all, a man who'd lost his soul saving souls, who'd become the villain to create heroes, who'd accepted that history would remember him as a monster if it meant future generations would live free. The healing connection peaked. The Shadowbane poison dissolved completely, the black veins fading to nothing. Kael's eyes snapped open, gasping as if surfacing from deep water. I saw, Sera whispered. I saw everything. And your judgment? She pulled back her hands, the glow fading. You're a manipulative bastard who gambled his life on my moral philosophy. She stood, offering her hand. You're also the most complicated, infuriating, necessary evil I've ever encountered. She smiled slightly. Get up. We have a council meeting to attend. He took her hand, standing fully for the first time in weeks. The healing had been complete, not just the poison, but years of accumulated damage. He looked younger, stronger, almost dangerous in his renewed vitality. The decree, he asked. You'll give it. In front of the entire council. Sera's eyes glinted silver. And I'll stand beside you as proof that Omega power is not to be feared, but neither is it to be chained. They arrived at the council chamber together. The sight of them stopped conversations mid-word. The king, restored to health, striding in with the Omega healer beside him rather than behind him. Blackwood's face went white, then red with rage. Impossible. The poison has been cured, Kael announced, his voice resonating with renewed power. Thanks to the skill of Sera Moonwhisper, last of the true healing bloodline. He moved to his seat at the head of the council table but didn't sit. We have much to discuss. My lord, a lesser noble ventured. We'd gathered to discuss succession procedures, which are no longer necessary. Kael's smile was sharp. But we will discuss succession of a different sort. The succession of one era into another. Blackwood stood abruptly. This is premature. The council hasn't been consulted. Sit down, Blackwood. The command cracked like a whip. Or I'll have you arrested right now for the 300 Omegas you illegally executed in the southern province. Don't think I've forgotten. The council chamber went silent. Blackwood slowly sat, his eyes full of hatred. Kael continued, his voice carrying to every corner. For 8 years, I've ruled as my father taught me, with an iron fist, crushing dissent, maintaining the old order. Many of you approved. Some celebrated. All of you profited. He paused. But I've come to understand something. My father was wrong, and so was I. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the nobles. As is my right as king, and in fulfillment of a blood oath witnessed by this council, I hereby decree the immediate emancipation of all Omegas within the kingdom. He pulled out a scroll, one of the documents from Project Phoenix, Sera realized. Effective immediately. All breeding programs are abolished. All Omega debts are forgiven. All Omegas are granted full citizenship with rights to property, education, and political participation. Any violation of these rights will be prosecuted as treason. The chamber erupted. You can't. This is madness. The noble houses will never. Silence. Kael's alpha dominance rolled out like a physical force, pressing down on everyone. Even Sera felt the weight of it, though her healer's training helped her resist. I am your king. This is my decree. Any who oppose it can face me in trial by combat. His smile was predatory. I'm feeling much better now. Who wants to be first? No one moved. Blackwood stood again, more carefully this time. My lord, even if this decree is legal, it's suicide. The noble houses fund your military. We control the regional governments. We'll simply refuse to implement. You'll be dead, Kael interrupted pleasantly. Captain Lyra? Lyra stepped forward, carrying a thick folder. Lord Blackwood, you're under arrest for illegal execution of kingdom citizens, embezzlement of crown funds, and conspiracy to commit regicide. She dropped the folder on the table. We have 8 years of evidence. Testimony from survivors. Financial records. Even a confession from your own second-in-command, who turned King's evidence yesterday. Blackwood's face went from red to purple. This is a setup. You've been planning. For 8 years, yes. Kael's voice was cold now. Did you really think I didn't notice your schemes? I was just waiting until I had enough to bury you completely. He looked at the other nobles. Anyone else want to join him? Because I have folders for 12 more of you. Smaller crimes, perhaps, but enough to strip titles and lands. The nobles looked at each other, fear replacing outrage. Or, Kael continued, his voice softening slightly. You can accept that the world is changing. Adapt to it. Profit from it. Even there are economic incentives in the decree for early adopters. But fight it, and I will destroy you. He sat finally, projecting casual confidence. Your choice. One by one, the nobles bowed their heads in submission. Not agreement, Sera knew, but acknowledgement of power. For now, that would have to be enough. As guards led Blackwood away in chains, Sera stepped forward. One more thing. The Omega Sanctum will be reopened as the Royal Academy of Healing Arts. Any Omega who wishes to learn healing magic may do so freely. We will train a new generation of healers, and we will remember who we are. The council session ended in chaos. Some nobles genuinely supportive, others quietly furious but cowed, most simply trying to figure out how to survive the coming changes. Outside the chamber, Kael leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted despite his healing.
Well,
That's done. That's begun, Sera corrected. The real work starts now. Implementing the decree, managing the backlash, rebuilding an entire social structure. I know. He looked at her. I'll need help. Someone who understands both worlds, Omega and Alpha. Someone who's not afraid to call me out when I'm being an idiot. Are you offering me a position? I'm offering you whatever role you want. Advisor, minister, ambassador, partner. He paused. Friend. Sera considered him, this complicated man who'd been monster and savior, tyrant and liberator. I'll stay. For now. To make sure you follow through. To hold you accountable. Mercy with accountability. Exactly. A messenger ran up, breathless. My lord. Reports from the provinces. The decree is spreading faster than expected. There are celebrations in the Omega districts. But also, he hesitated. Lord Riker's forces are mobilizing. He's calling the decree illegitimate.
Kael sighed.
And so it begins. He straightened, the king returning. Ready for a war. Healer? Sera's hands began to glow with silver light. Not healing magic this time, but combat magic. The secret her mother had discovered. The power that healers had forgotten they possessed. Because a healer who understood life could also command death. I've been ready my whole life, she said. Let's remind the world what Omegas can really do. The rebellion came faster than even Kael anticipated. Within hours of the decree, 3 noble houses openly declared it void. Within days, regional lords were mobilizing troops. Within a week, the kingdom teetered on the brink of civil war. Sera stood in the war room, watching messengers come and go with updates. Red markers on the map indicated rebel forces, more than she'd hoped, fewer than she'd feared. Lord Riker controls the eastern province, Lyra reported, updating positions. He's rallied for lesser houses and approximately 3,000 troops. Lord Ashbourne holds the western mountains with 2,000 more. And the northern territories are complicated. Complicated how? Kael asked, his focus absolute. The northern lords haven't declared for either side. They're waiting to see who wins. Practical. Kael studied the map. Riker's forces are larger, but Ashbourne's position is more defensible. We need to. My lord. A scout burst in, bloodied and gasping. The Omega districts in the capital, they're under attack. Riker sympathizers, armed civilians, they're burning homes, dragging people into the streets. Sera was moving before he finished. I'm going. Sera, wait. Kael started.
No.
She turned, and her silver eyes blazed with power. You decreed us free. Now protect us while we learn how to protect ourselves. She ran. The Omega district was chaos. Flames licked at wooden buildings. Screaming filled the air. A mob of Alpha civilians, merchants, workers, the middle class who'd profited from Omega subjugation, rampaged through streets, attacking anyone they found. Sera saw a group cornering a family in an alley. Without thinking, she raised her hands. Silver light exploded outward, not to heal, but to harm. The attackers collapsed, clutching their heads, experiencing sudden agonizing pain as their own neural pathways turned against them. "Get to the sanctum," she yelled at the family. "It's fortified." She moved through the district like an avenging angel, her healing magic weaponized. Every attacker she touched experienced instantaneous, debilitating pain, their own bodies betraying them. She didn't kill, but she made them wish she had. Other Omegas saw and began to fight back. Some used improvised weapons. Others, those with latent healing abilities awakened by desperation, found they could do what Sera did, turn their power into protection. By the time the King's Guard arrived, the mob had fled. The Omega district stood, battered but unbroken. Kael found her in the main square, surrounded by injured Omegas she was healing. Her hands glowed steadily, moving from person to person, mending wounds and easing pain. "That was reckless," he said quietly. "That was necessary." She didn't look up from her work. "Your decree freed us legally. Now, they're trying to kill us physically. We need to be able to defend ourselves." "I know." He knelt beside her, helping bandage wounds. "That's why I'm establishing the Omega Defense Corps. Legal military unit, trained and equipped to protect Omega communities. Captain Lyra will oversee training." Sera paused, looking at him in surprise. "When did you plan this?" "About 3 seconds after you ran out of the war room." He smiled slightly. "You're not the only one who can adapt quickly." Over the next 2 weeks, the kingdom transformed. The Omega Defense Corps grew from concept to reality. Hundreds of Omegas, male and female, training in combat and defensive magic. The Academy of Healing Arts reopened, teaching both healing and combat applications. Omega voices began appearing in government, businesses, society. But the rebellion also grew. Riker's forces attacked supply lines. Ashbourne raided loyalist strongholds. The Northern Lords finally declared for the rebels, adding 5,000 troops to the opposition. "We're outnumbered," Lyra reported grimly. 10,000 royal troops against nearly 12,000 rebels. And their forces are battle-hardened from border wars. "Numbers aren't everything," Kael countered. "We have defensive positions, supply superiority," and he glanced at Sera. "A weapon they don't expect." "I'm not a weapon," Sera said flatly.
No.
"You're a symbol." Kael pulled out deployment plans. "Word has spread about what you did in the Omega District. Omegas across the kingdom are awakening combat magic abilities that have been suppressed for centuries. Riker's forces expect weak slaves. Instead, they'll face trained defenders." "It's still not enough," Sera argued. "We need something more. Something that changes the calculation completely." "Such as?" She was quiet for a moment, an idea forming. "The other kingdoms. The surrounding nations. They all practice Omega subjugation too, right?"
Yes.
"The system is continental. But they're also your rivals. What if?" She leaned over the map. "What if we offered something they couldn't refuse? A diplomatic revolution that serves their interests while undermining the rebellion?" Kael's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Explain." "Riker and the rebels claim Omega emancipation will destroy the kingdom economically and militarily. What if we prove them wrong by forming alliances with neighboring kingdoms, offering them trade advantages, military cooperation, even shared magical knowledge from the Academy, in exchange for recognizing Omega rights?" She traced possible alliance lines on the map. Suddenly, the rebellion isn't defending traditional values. It's opposing international agreements backed by multiple crowns. Lyra whistled low. "That's actually brilliant. Isolate the rebels diplomatically while strengthening your position militarily." "It's also risky," Kael said. "The other kingdoms might see this as weakness. An opportunity to invade while we're distracted with civil war. Or," Sera countered, "they might see it as an opportunity to profit from progressive change without taking the political risk themselves. Let you be the experiment. If it succeeds, they benefit. If it fails, they invade and pick up the pieces." "You have a remarkably cynical view of international politics for a healer." "I'm learning from you." Kael studied the map, then nodded decisively.
Do it.
Draft the proposals. Lyra, send envoys to the neighboring kingdoms. Use trusted Omegas where possible. Show them that emancipated Omegas can serve diplomatic functions.
He stood.
If we're going to change one kingdom, we might as well change the continent. The diplomatic offensive moved faster than anyone expected. The Kingdom of Silvermere, longtime rival, agreed to a trade pact in exchange for access to healing magic training. The Coastal Confederacy recognized Omega rights in return for military cooperation against pirates. Even the isolationist mountain principalities sent observers to study the experiment. Each agreement was a blow to the rebellion's legitimacy. But Riker adapted too. He sent assassins. He poisoned wells in Omega districts. He spread propaganda claiming Sera had ensorcelled the king with forbidden magic. The rumors are working, one of Sera's informants reported. People are starting to believe you've mind-controlled him. Then we dispel them publicly, Kael decided. Joint appearances. Demonstrate that we're partners, not puppet and master. They toured the kingdom together, visiting freed Omegas, inspecting Defense Corps training, speaking at town squares. Sera healed the sick in public demonstrations. Kael issued pardons to imprisoned Omegas, offered reparations to families destroyed in the purge. Slowly, public opinion began to shift. But the military situation remained dire. Riker's forces controlled a third of the kingdom. Battle was inevitable. He's marching on the capital, Lyra reported 3 weeks after the initial decree. 15,000 troops. He's rallied more supporters. They'll be here in 5 days. Kael looked at his own forces. 8,000 royal troops, 2,000 Omega Defense Corps, various militia. Still outnumbered. We make our stand at the river crossing, he decided. Defensive position. Force them to attack uphill. Use the terrain. And hope it's enough, Lyra added grimly. The night before the battle, Sera found Kael alone on the palace walls, staring out at the horizon where cook fires marked the rebel army's approach. Nervous, she asked. Terrified, he admitted. What if I'm wrong? What if this breaks the kingdom beyond repair? Then we rebuild it better. She stood beside him. You spent 8 years playing it safe, changing things slowly to avoid war. Now we're at war anyway. At least this time, we're fighting for something worth the cost. How are you so calm? I'm not. She showed him her trembling hands. I'm absolutely terrified. But I'm also more alive than I've ever been. For the first time, I'm not hiding. Not pretending to be weaker than I am. Not accepting that my people deserve subjugation. She looked at him. You gave me that. Gave us all that. So whatever happens tomorrow, thank you. He took her hand, steadying the trembling. If we survive this. When we survive this. When we survive this, he corrected with a slight smile. I want you to know something. The best decision I ever made wasn't poisoning myself or planning Project Phoenix. It was betting everything on you making the right choice. I could have let you die, but you didn't. You chose mercy with accountability. You chose the harder path. He squeezed her hand gently. You chose to believe people can change. Can they?
Can you?
I'm trying. He looked back at the horizon. And tomorrow, we'll find out if that's enough. The dawn came too quickly. The Battle of the River Crossing would be remembered for centuries, but not for the reasons anyone expected. Sera stood on the defensive ridge, watching Riker's forces approach. 15,000 soldiers, their banners displaying the old kingdom crest, the wolf devouring the moon. A symbol of alpha dominance over Omega subjugation. Behind her, Kael's forces prepared. 8,000 royal troops, 2,000 Omega Defense Corps members, their new banner showing a wolf and moon in balance. They're not slowing, Lyra observed, spyglass to her eye. Riker's confident. He thinks sheer numbers will overwhelm us. He's not accounting for Omega combat magic, Sera said. He still thinks we're helpless. Then let's educate him. The rebel army reached the river. Riker himself rode at the front, his armor gleaming, confidence radiating. He raised his hand, ready to signal the charge.
And stopped.
Because standing in the river itself, blocking the crossing, were 300 Omega healers. Their hands glowed with silver light, not raised in attack, but in demonstration. The water around them began to churn, rising in spiraling columns that danced in the morning light. "What are they doing?" a rebel commander shouted. Sera stepped forward to the ridge's edge, her voice carrying across the battlefield through enhancement magic. "Lord Riker, you come to preserve the old ways, to maintain Omega subjugation, to prove that we are weak and need masters." "You are weak," Riker bellowed back. "Healers and servants. You cannot stand against true warriors." "Then let me show you what healers can do." Sera raised her hands. The 300 healers in the river mirrored her gesture. And the water rose. Not in columns now, but in a massive wave that hung suspended, thousands of gallons of river water held aloft by collective Omega magic. The rebel army stumbled backward, horses rearing in panic. "Healing magic controls life," Sera called out, her voice echoing with power. "And all life requires water. We can give it." The wave gently lowered back to the river. "Or we can take it away." She gestured again. The wave rose higher, then split into 1,000 droplets that hung glittering in the air like deadly rain. "But we won't," Sera continued, "because unlike you, we don't measure strength by how many we can kill. We measure it by how many we can save." She lowered her hands completely. "So, I'm giving you a choice, Lord Riker.
Stand down.
Accept the new laws. Help us build something better. Or what?" Riker snarled, though his voice shook. "You'll kill us all with water droplets?"
No.
A new voice rang out, Diya Silverstream, the former assassin, now leading an Omega Defense Corps unit. "But you'll have to kill us all first. And we won't die easily." More voices joined hers. Omega soldiers stepping forward. Freed Omega families from the capital appearing on the hillsides, thousands of them, showing their support. Even some of Riker's own troops, Omegas pressed into service, began laying down their weapons. "You can't win this," Kael called out, riding forward to stand beside Sera. "Not militarily, not politically, not morally. The world is changing, Riker. You can change with it or be left behind." For a long moment, the battlefield held its breath. Then Riker lowered his sword. "I fought for the old kingdom," he said heavily. "The kingdom my father knew, my grandfather. Generations of strength and order." He looked at his troops, saw the Omega soldiers deserting, saw the fear in those who remained. But maybe that kingdom is already gone. He dismounted, walked forward alone, and knelt before Kael. "I surrender. Do with me as you will." The battle that should have broken the kingdom ended without a single death. 3 months later, the throne room had been remodeled. The throne of swords remained, but now it was flanked by 3 smaller seats, positions for the newly formed Council of Balance, an Omega representative, a Beta representative, and an Alpha representative who weren't from noble houses. Sera sat in the Omega seat, still uncomfortable with the role, but growing into it. "Next petition," Kael called. A young Omega man stepped forward. "Your Majesty, I wish to open a healing clinic in the Eastern Province. I've completed training at the Academy and—" "Granted," Kael said immediately. "Report to the Royal Treasury for startup funds." Next, the petitions continued, Omega businesses requesting permits, mixed households seeking marriage recognition, former breeding house survivors asking for reparations. Each one, Kael addressed with increasing confidence in the new system. After the session ended, Sera and Kael walked through the palace gardens together, a habit they developed, these quiet moments away from the constant demands of rebuilding a kingdom. "Riker sent a message," Kael said. "He's running for regional governor in." Continue. 3:50 a.m. The Eastern Province. Running on a platform of reconciliation and reform. Sera raised her eyebrows. The man who led a rebellion 3 months ago? The man who surrendered without bloodshed and has been working to convince other traditionalists to accept the changes. Kael smiled slightly. Apparently, people appreciate a reformed zealot more than a consistent moderate. He might actually win. Are you okay with that? I'm okay with anything that moves us forward peacefully. He paused by a fountain newly installed, designed by an Omega artist. The Northern Territories officially recognized Omega rights yesterday. That makes 4 of our 6 neighbors. The continent is shifting. Because you forced it to shift. Sera watched the water sparkle in the afternoon light. By nearly dying, manipulating me, and gambling everything on a healer's choice. My finest moment of strategic desperation. He turned to her, his expression growing serious. I've been thinking about something you said. About mercy with accountability. What about it? I want to establish a truth council. A formal body where victims of the old system can testify about what happened to them. Where perpetrators, including me, can be held accountable publicly. He met her eyes. Not to punish, necessarily, but to acknowledge. To make sure the horrors aren't forgotten or minimized as we move forward. Sera studied him. You testify? Admit to your role in maintaining the subjugation. Every signature I forged. Every slow reform that let people suffer longer than necessary. Every cowardly choice I dressed up as strategy. His jaw clenched.
Yes.
I'd testify to all of it. That could destroy your political capital. Make you vulnerable to challenges. Probably. He managed a slight smile. But you taught me something. Real change requires vulnerability. Requires admitting fault. I can't ask the kingdom to transform while hiding from my own truth. Sera felt something shift in her chest, the last barrier of distrust finally crumbling. You really have changed. I'm trying to. He hesitated, then added quietly. With your help. If you'll stay. As what? Your Omega advisor? Your political asset? You're living proof that the system works. As my partner. The word hung in the air between them. Not in the romantic sense. I know that's not what we are. But as equals trying to fix something broken. As 2 people who've seen the worst of each other and still chose to build something better. Sera was quiet for a long moment, watching the fountain. Then she smiled. Partnership. I can do partnership. Good. Relief flooded his features. Because I have about 1,000 crises that need solving, and you're annoyingly better at most of them than I am. Flattery will get you everywhere. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, until a messenger found them with the latest reports. Omega enrollment in universities up 300%. Economic growth in freed Omega districts exceeding predictions. Only 2 minor skirmishes with traditionalist holdouts in remote regions. It's working, Sera marveled. Actually working. For now, Kael cautioned. We're in the honeymoon phase. Real resistance will come when people realize how much is actually changing. When economic power shifts. When Omega candidates run for high office. When an Omega sits on the throne itself, Sera finished. He looked at her sharply. I hadn't thought that far ahead. Liar. You've planned everything 15 years in advance. You've absolutely considered succession. She studied him. What happens when you die, Kael? You have no heir. No designated successor. Does the crown go back to a noble house? Does the council elect someone? Or do we end the monarchy entirely and establish a true representative government? He smiled at her shocked expression. Yes, I've considered it. Phase 5 of Project Phoenix, never written down because it's too radical even for me. He looked up at the palace, symbol of generations of alpha dominance. Maybe the greatest reform is the last one. The king who ends kings. That's actually beautiful. And terrifying. Most good ideas are both. He turned back to her. But that's a problem for future US. Present us has enough to handle. As if summoning it, Lyra appeared at a run. My lord. News from the southern province. The Omega settlement at Clearwater. They've discovered ancient ruins beneath the sanctum there. Healing texts, magical artifacts, things we thought were lost forever. Sera's heart leaped. The old knowledge. The real history of Omega magic before the subjugation. Teams are excavating now, Lyra continued. Early reports suggest there's enough preserved material to completely rewrite our understanding of healing magic. They're calling it the Moonwhisper Archive. Sera felt tears prick her eyes. Her family name, the name her mother had died bearing, was now attached to the rediscovery of their people's lost heritage. Go, Kael said gently. I'll handle things here. You should be there for this. You're sure? Sera, this is your people's history. Your legacy. He smiled. Besides, I need you to learn everything in that archive, so you can teach it at the academy. We're going to need a lot more combat healers if we're going to keep this revolution alive. She hugged him impulsively, surprising them both. Thank you. For everything. Thank you for not letting me die. He returned the embrace briefly. Now go. History is waiting. 1 year later. The anniversary celebration of the Emancipation Decree filled the capital with music, dancing, and hope. Omega families walked freely through streets that had once barred them. Mixed couples displayed affection openly. Children of all designations played together without the rigid hierarchies that had defined previous generations. Sera stood on a balcony overlooking the festivities, wearing formal robes that marked her as both master healer and council representative. The past year had been exhausting. Implementing reforms, training new healers, managing backlash, teaching at the academy, excavating the Moonwhisper archive. But it had also been miraculous. Quite a sight, isn't it? She turned to find Kael joining her, dressed simply rather than in royal regalia. He'd been doing that more often, appearing as a man rather than a king. 365 days since you almost died, Sera observed. How does it feel? Like the longest and shortest year of my life. He leaned on the balcony railing. We freed 340,000 Omegas, established legal protections, reformed the government, started a continental revolution. He smiled. And I'm exhausted. You're also dying again. He looked at her in shock. What? Not poison this time. Sera's healer sight showed her the subtle signs. Exhaustion. Stress. You're burning yourself out trying to do everything personally. You need to delegate more. Trust more. Rest more. I can't rest. There's too much.
Kael.
She took his hand. You spent 8 years building up to this moment. You don't have to carry it all alone anymore. That's what the council is for. What I'm for. What Lyra is for.
She squeezed gently.
You're allowed to be human. He was quiet for a long moment, watching the celebrations below. Then he laughed, genuinely freely. You know what the strangest part is? I'm happy. Actually happy. For the first time in, I can't remember how long. Good. You deserve it. Do I? His smile faded. After everything I did, everyone I failed, you're doing the work, making amends, building something better. Sera looked out at the celebrating crowds. That's all any of us can do. Acknowledge the past, work in the present, hope for the future. Mercy with accountability. Exactly. A young Omega girl approached the balcony, carrying flowers. She looked up at them with wide, fearless eyes. Are you the king and the healer? The ones who changed everything. Kael knelt down to her level. We helped, but lots of people changed everything together. My mama says you're heroes. She offered the flowers shyly. Sera took them gently. Your mama is very kind. What's your name? Luna. The girl beamed. I'm going to be a healer like you when I grow up. And maybe a soldier. Or a scientist. Mama says I can be anything now. Your mama is absolutely right, Sera said, her voice thick with emotion. After Luna ran off to rejoin her family, Kael stood slowly.
That.
Right there. That's why it was all worth it. A child who believes she can be anything. A child who doesn't know fear when looking at an alpha king. His voice was soft. A child growing up in a different world than we did. They watched the celebrations continue as the sun set, painting the sky in golds and purples. The city below glowed with lanterns and laughter. Somewhere in the crowd, former enemies danced together. Somewhere else, Omega students from the academy demonstrated healing magic to amazed onlookers. And everywhere, people were simply free. So, Sera said eventually. What's next? Phase 5? Ending the monarchy? Maybe. Kael smiled. Or maybe I take your advice and rest for a while. Let the system we've built actually work without me micromanaging every detail. He glanced at her. What about you? Any plans beyond teaching and council work? I'm writing a book. At his surprised look, she explained. The complete history of Omega magic from the Moonwhisper archive. Everything that was lost. Everything we're rediscovering. So the next generation won't forget. She paused. I'm dedicating it to my mother. She'd be proud of you. I hope so. Sera looked at the flowers Luna had given her. I spent so long hating you for what happened to her. For what happened to all of us. And now. Now I understand that change is messy. Progress is complicated. People are capable of both terrible and wonderful things, sometimes simultaneously. She met his eyes. You're still a manipulative bastard who gambled his life on my moral philosophy. Guilty. But you're also the reason thousands of people are free. The reason that little girl believes she can be anything. The reason the world is changing. She smiled. I can live with that complexity. Mercy with accountability. Always. As fireworks began exploding over the city, an Omega innovation, magical pyrotechnics that spelled out messages of hope and freedom, Sera and Kael stood together, watching their impossible dream become reality. It wasn't perfect. There were still struggles ahead. Economic adjustments, social friction, pockets of resistance. But for the first time in 3 centuries, Omega and Alpha stood as equals. And that changed everything. You know what the secret was? Kael said quietly. The one that destroyed me and saved the kingdom?
What?
It wasn't your healing magic, though that was part of it. It wasn't the truth about my reforms, though that mattered too. He looked at her. The secret was choice. You had the power to save or condemn me, and you chose based on what was right rather than what was easy or emotionally satisfying. That choice, that moment of genuine moral agency, proved everything I'd been arguing for. That Omegas weren't weak creatures needing masters. That given power, you'd use it wisely. No pressure, Sera said dryly. Well, you did destroy me. Just not in the way I expected. He smiled. You destroyed the version of me that believed cruelty was strength. That believed the only way to rule was through fear. You showed me that vulnerability could be powerful. That mercy could be strategic. That admitting fault could rebuild rather than ruin. So, in the end, the Omega healer really did destroy the Alpha King. And built something better in his place. Kael extended his hand formally. Partners? Sera took it, her grip firm and equal. Partners. Below them, the celebration continued into the night. And in that moment, standing on a balcony overlooking a transforming kingdom, the healer and the king, the Omega and the Alpha, proved that even the most broken systems could be rebuilt. One impossible choice at a time. The end.